Well, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome or welcome back, as the case might be. My name is Dalibor Petrovic. I'm a partner at Deloitte. And over the last number of years, I've had a pleasure to host the series of live webcast conversations that Deloitte has been putting on, primarily for our tech leadership and tech enthusiast audiences. Today, on this fine April the 9th, 2024, I'm thrilled to welcome you to the episode 2 of our Measuring Value from Digital Transformations series. And this series of conversations is based on the research that Deloitte recently completed to better understand how organizations that do this well think about, measure, extract, and report value from their digital transformation journeys. In our first episode, we share the overview of the report, and that is recorded, and of course you can have a look at it. But today, we are going to do a deeper dive into the industry perspectives and how different industries both approach and then measure and report on their sort of value from digital transformation. Then to unpack this topic, I am thrilled to be joined by two of my friends and colleagues. First, I'll like to briefly introduce Tim Smith. Tim Smith is a managing partner and leader of our technology strategy and business transformation practice at Deloitte US, and is joining us this morning from Boston. Tim, lovely to see you. Thank you for your time. And also, I'm thrilled to welcome Diana Kearns-Manolatos. Diana leads Deloitte's tech transformation research globally and is sort of the engine behind this particular research and this particular data that we will share. So I would also like to remind the audience that you are watching a live session. So first of all, please bear with any technical challenges we might have. But the second important thing is that this will actually allow you to engage in a conversation with us. So if you have any questions or comments or thoughts, please feel free to submit them using the Q&A function of this Zoom platform. And with that, I think we should just delve right into it. And probably the best way to do this is to take sort of the biggest of broad pictures, the broad views, and give us a bit of a context. So Tim, I would invite if you can maybe give us a little bit of a context to the conversation, and then we'll delve into the details of the value discussion. So Tim, over to you.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much for having me today, Dalibor. It's always a pleasure. And thank you everyone for attending. Yes, please, let's keep this as interactive as possible. Put questions in the chat and we'll try to address them in real time. So why are we here today? So this is part of a series, not only in terms of what Dalibor is conducting, but just part of our research proper. I won't go all the way back in time as to everything that's behind the scenes here, but one of the things we've been wanting to do is understand globally exactly what digital transformations feel like to enterprises. It's one thing for us to talk about them in the abstract and say, yes, everybody should digitally transform and it's continuous and all of that, which are all important. And it's very important for us to also say, you have to link it ultimately to what your ambitions are and all of that. But every time we've had conversations with clients, they're like, that's great. I think I got it. But what does it mean to me? How do I think about myself regarding digital transformation vis-a-vis my competitors? What should I be doing different? And we'd love to say, okay, don't worry about it. We have an index. We have this one thing that if you just check yourself against it, you'll figure it out. But that's just not how it works. As I often say, Diana as well, this is a multiplex endeavor in which there's no single answer as to what to get right regarding digital transformation. But there are signposts out there. And what the purpose of today's discussion is to try to show some of those to you. So what we're going to talk about? What we want to talk about is ultimately when you're thinking about tackling digital transformation, how we think you should at least understand what you're trying to take on, then how you start acknowledging what your peers may be doing, right? And then also some of the barriers they might find, et cetera. And so we're going to go through a walk today not a walk in which we flood you with 1,000 slides, but a walk that is enough for you to understand at least the research that's out there to help you contextualize your digital transformation moves as they pertain to industries and sectors. Now, hopefully you'll join us as well as we go and have this follow-on series regarding regional nuances, but that isn't today. It's also important for everybody here to understand that what we're showing you is public, it's available, there's slides, and we are not going to take you through all of them, but it's a way for you to understand the nuggets and how to harness. So without further ado, let's jump in with that context and maybe just me give you a little bit more background as well as to why I'm here talking about it and so passionate about it. As Dalibor mentioned, I head up for the States what we call our tech strategy and business transformation practice. I've been with Deloitte for over 20 years, and I've been a hands-on technologist and evangelist throughout, across sectors, et cetera. I've always believed in the promise of technology and what can be harnessed. But I'm also part of our broader strategy practice. And myself, I've learned to pump the brakes and make sure that we are thoughtful as to what we're taking on in terms of our tech investments, et cetera. And why I was so excited to help lead this perspectives, this eminent set with Diana and team, because it's a way to really bridge the gap. How do you basically make sure that these massive capital bets are going to have returns that you can justify? So that's me. That's why I'm here. And now let's jump into why we have the slide as the backdrop. So to kick off digital transformations, whether you are shaping a new one, whether one's come across your desk, whatever it means, digital transformation as a phrase means everything and nothing. So what we like to do in the first conversation, and this will actually be sort of the baseline as to how we go through subsequent slides, is to say, well, ultimately, what are you really doing with digital transformation? And this spectrum is something that didn't come from this research, but an earlier piece in which we talked to a whole bunch of CEOs to understand how they thought and saw digital transformation. And here's how to interpret. There's none of these are better than the other, right? We're not saying level 0 is worse than level 4, et cetera. And you might be doing a bunch of these at once within an enterprise. But what matters most is when someone is saying to you, I am digitally transforming, to have the conversation that tries to figure out what they believe they're doing from a digital transformation perspective, e.g. what level they're trying to take on versus what they are actually doing. And part of the subsequent slides is going to help you demystify reality versus planned as well. So on the left-hand side of the spectrum is really inward focusing. It's about productivity enhancements, optimization. You got the same business model, same capabilities, same products. You're not really changing what goes out to your customers, but you are figuring out ways to squeeze out the inefficiencies, right? And that could be digitization of core processes. That could be bringing in Gen AI to just remove things that were using too many human handoffs. It could be a host of activities, but again, it's really inward focusing. Now, one would argue that a lot of the bolder digital transformations need some aspect of level 0, level 1 to happen before you can really scale, but that's for a different day. Then if you cross over on this and you hit like level 2, level 3, level 4, that's when your enterprise operating model starts changing. That's when you have new capabilities that you're trying to build out, gone from brick and mortar to online, which is probably passé at this stage, but actually doing something that no one in your enterprise has done before, and you can only do it on the back of digital thinking. Different business models, new markets, whatever it might be. If someone's coming to you and saying, I'm digitally transforming and it's a really big deal and it's really bold, and I'm going to enter in these new markets, right? Then the question is like, okay, you're probably doing, level 2. Why does this matter? I'll get to it in the second slide in a second, but to thine own self be true. If you are saying you're doing a digital transformation, then what matters is what you're doing to mobilize the enterprise behind the scenes. So if you're believing you're taking on the most radical digital transformation on earth, but really your business model, your capabilities, your market, they're all staying the same, and really you're looking at how you can do better end-to-end processing within your back office, great, super important, but you're not going to have to get everybody in the enterprise mobilized to make this successful. You're not necessarily going to have to pull people out of their day jobs to get it done. And honestly, if you're running around saying that's what you're doing, that is that bold, but you're not really making those moves, then something's awry. And then on the flip side, if, for example, you believe you're doing kind of a level 1 type of thing, but maybe you should pressure test. Maybe in adopting these new technologies, it allows you to go into new markets. It allows you to stand up new business models. Or maybe you're leaving value on the table as well. So this is a long-winded way of saying, look, there's a way to think about digital transformations and a way to gut check for yourself whether everybody in the enterprise is thinking about it the same way. That's what the spectrum is. So
this is fascinatingly,
yeah.
and you know, Tim, when we saw this for the first time, I was like, oh my God, this was the missing piece. As we try to help clients understand how to actually think about these major projects in front of them and to what degree they should be securing executive sponsorship for these different types. Where the ones on the left, as you rightly pointed out, they actually might not need to have, executive business sponsorship because they actually are dealing with optimization and digitization of existing things. But the more we move to the right, the more senior leaders in the organization need to be present and immerse and drive visibly, right? And the one on the far right, I would say very much needs to be at the epicenter of the board agenda and CEO's agenda, right?
And right.
A lot of times this mismatch of who needs to be playing what role can cause significant challenges and be a big obstacle, actually can lead the whole initiative in the wrong direction. So this is really, really important to truly, I think, understand and appreciate. So thank you very much for sharing this. This is powerful stuff.
100%. And I am sort of leading our collective witness here because I want to go to the next slide that then starts contextualizing by industry, but gives you a good early taste as to where we already know that there is a mismatch between plan versus reality. So just a little bit more context for those who weren't on the first series, we released a survey globally to about 1,600 tech leaders across almost any level you can think of, regions, et cetera. And we asked them a ton of questions. So if you're one of those survey respondents, thank you for taking the time. But when we sent it out, one of the questions we asked, and we'll go through all the questions a bit, one of the questions we asked was saying, hey, based off that spectrum, when you think about digital transformation, where are you falling? And not where are you falling, just how do you feel? Where's the bulk of your spend going regarding your digital transformations? And so if you follow this color code, almost all of them, well, all of them are at least 40% or higher saying they're doing a level 4 digital transformation. Remember on the previous slide, level 4 is all the way to the right. That is radical. As Dalibor mentioned, that is like a board level thing, right? There's no way, that's like a bet the company type of move, unless you're really greenfielding out a smaller business and letting it move. It's a big deal. Now, when we look at this, that was a surprise, even for me being in the field, like we work with a lot of clients. Do we believe all of them when they're doing digital transformation are falling more in terms of radical greenfielding for everything they're doing? No, not really. So it's our hypothesis, and maybe we'll be proven wrong on this. I mean, the survey says there is a tendency of folks to believe they're transforming way more than they actually are. And if they do believe they're transforming at a level 4 type level, then there's way more they need to do to mobilize the enterprise to increase the odds of success. There's always a number that's floating out there about what allows a digital transformation to succeed, the success rate, et cetera. And, the vast majority, a whole bunch of different folks have estimated this is like, 70% of digital transformations or business transformations fail. The big reason why it fails is that the business does not stay along with them for the ride. This is a great example based off the survey data that folks are believing are doing a radical transformation, but they're probably not bringing the business along with them to get it done. And we get these questions a lot. Yes, we asked exactly the question in line with that spectrum, but this is a way to start thinking about it. So if you wanted to understand where your peers are at in terms of the digital transformation spectrum, this is generally where they're investing overall. And Diana and Tim's reaction is probably a bit too excited as to what they're really doing. So take it a little bit with a grain of salt. But let's keep going down the well now that you know that we have these industry cuts. This slide I absolutely love because part of the survey that we also asked, and this is a bit more hard to the ground type of a discussion was, even if you got your digital transformation right, even if you know what you want to take on and you know what's going to change for your enterprise operating model, what do you have to worry about? And how do you pressure test whether you've appropriately addressed the barriers that everybody's going to hit, the dragons that are lurking regarding digital transformation? And we start with this early on because it's great to have a conversation about this is what you could do with digital transformation, these are the technologies you could take on, et cetera. But if you talk to an enterprise and you're like, I have massive monolithic applications in which no matter what I can do, what I do, I am capped, I am stuck with those systems, right? Maybe you need to trim your sails a bit as to your ambitions. And so this shows you a good view, especially trying to sectorize what's going on, which sectors have the biggest pain regarding certain barriers. If you follow sort of the sawtooth that's shown here, for example, consumer is really dragged down via legacy systems dependency, more so than anyone else. Consumer also flags the same type of problem from just folks maybe not understanding the technology, which you would argue is correlated to legacy systems. But I'll let folks follow along. But this is a way to think about, again, as you are starting up or reacting to a digital transformation, pressure testing, whether or not you're appropriately hitting barriers in front.
Here is the list of things to check, right? The list of things to check, the things that will get you, right?
That's right, top 10.
Yeah.
Okay, and so if we keep going down the well here, then we also ask folks, it's a bit of an eye chart, but this is available to everybody. And we also ask folks and said, okay, fine. Based off that, how do you prescribe value to digital transformations? What are the KPIs that underpin, whether we call them metrics, whether we call them KPIs? What are you ultimately looking to get out of digital transformations? And so we asked this across 46 different KPIs and 5 different domains. What are the KPIs that are most important to you? Where do you leverage it? Diana will take us through a very specific power dive per industry as to which ones matter the most. But same type of discussion that Dalibor alluded to, as you were going and shaping a digital transformation, if you think you can get over the filters of these big constraints or barriers that are out there, you've appropriately addressed. The next question is, am I really thinking about all of the value that's out there? Or am I just defaulting to the classics? By the classics, if you look here, starting at the top, budget versus actual cost, right? 78% of everybody we talk to, they use that. Now, obviously, you're going to need that for a digital transformation. What you'll find surprising is how many people just use something like that and that's it, right? And so that's where we get sad when we look at these digital transformations, because again, if you believe all the way back to what we saw, that you're doing radical business transformation, or at least aspiring to it, but the only way you're measuring it is productivity or plan versus actual regarding a budgetary perspective, that ain't radical, right? And so this gives you a check to understand whether or not there's some KPIs out there that maybe you should have considered. It's not in this discussion, but there's a pretty deep dive out there that also, for those who are really interested, if you generally use these type of KPIs, we found other cohorts that also use these other ones, and that together it might make a more powerful business case for you.
And I noticed in this model, and by the way, this is again fantastic insight. This is the recipe on how organizations could actually think about articulating that value coming out of the digital transformation. There's 46 individual KPIs, but out of these 46, only 11 are those that we just called traditional. So the world of value opportunities, therefore, is much broader than what people have historically and many today focus on. And one more, I think, important thing, I think that discussion about what is value versus cost, the simple way that I think about it, and I'm not sure if you're going to agree with this or not, but to me, sort of the cost is what I pay for something. Value is what I get for it, right? That will be the simplest way to to move the conversation off of the cost and into the value. What do they pay versus what do they get?
100%. Okay, so this is the KPI wheel to help you contextualize it, but just so we're sticking to the same rhythm, you go to the next slide. We also ask, so assume you know your spectrum, assume you know what you want to do for digital transformation, assume you can handle the barriers that are out there, you've acknowledged them, you plan for it, you have optionality, and assume you've really figured out, ultimately, this is where I think the value is going to come at a deeper level. Doesn't mean you need all 46, but you're quite thorough as to what you're hitting. Well, we also ask folks, hey, what is holding you back in actually measuring these, right? So you set these KPIs, they're out there. Are you comfortable you can really understand what is exactly happening with the digital transformation? And so we asked, again, for basically their top barriers to measuring it overall. You can see it's pretty consistent that folks are saying that defining these exact impacts or metrics is their biggest challenge. That's why we had the previous slide as an example. But also what is classic, but what is painful, right? We all know this when we go into digital transformation, the organizational silos, how folks may measure versus how you want to think about it. Again, all of these things matter to you, especially because it helps you build in sensitivity as to the metrics that you can hard estimate versus the metrics that might be soft. And the reason why we wanted to walk through this in this chain is that folks ask, like, what is a good digital transformation strategy? And again, like you're going to know it when you see it. But if it is something that establishes a lineage or checks off that you thought about these first few slides, you're in a pretty good spot. Let's put it that way, to then take it on. Now, without further ado, that's sort of the macro level view with some of the industry nuances that are there. What really matters for those of us by sector is to go in and see what this means specific by. So to that end, Diana, I'll hand off to you for the power dive.
Great, thanks, Tim. So I'm going to go through each of the 6 industries that were part of the study, and really build off and drill down into some of the data that Tim mentioned. Just to orient everyone, again, the global study was 1,600 survey respondents across 6 industries. So for each of the 6 industries, we're looking at about 200 to 250 in most cases for each of the industries. And looking at the same questions, how are they defining, how are they spending, and how are they measuring their digital value? So on the left side, we have some of the spending trends. And for each of the industries, I'm going to take you through what the spending patterns were for 20 different technologies we asked about in the study. And when we look at consumer organizations, we're calling them product and ecosystem leaders because their investment as well as their measurement behaviors are very focused on technology capabilities that are more distributed and connected capabilities, like API marketplaces that are allowing buyers and sellers to come together with interoperable technology capabilities. We see here in green that those consumer respondents are above average versus the global study in their investments in API marketplace capabilities. Consumer organizations are also above average based on 2023 data for investments in deep learning and 5G. In the gray, I would point out some areas where consumer respondents are trending below average. And for some of these, the numbers are quite high, but it's still below average. So data and analytics, 89% of consumer respondents are investing there. But the global survey average for data and analytics is over 90%. It's the #1 capability organizations are investing in. And this is really pre-generative AI fervor. So we could expect that all of these data, AI, deep learning types of investments over the last year will continue to grow and increase in priority and prioritization. So as of early in 2023, we saw that consumer organizations were investing at lower levels in data and analytics as well as AI versus other industries. Also, lower level investments in cloud platform and cloud native capabilities, IoT and edge computing and quantum computing. So if we take all of those technologies as a category, we can see that there's just a lower focus on investment in the technology computing infrastructure from consumer organizations. On the right side, we have how they're measuring value. And so to remind you of the KPI wheel that Tim just took us through, we have these 5 value categories: financial, customer, process, workforce, and purpose. And so among consumer organizations, notably, if you remember, Tim pointed out the #1 financial KPI overall was budget versus actual cost. But it's different for consumer organizations. They tend to have their financial leading measure be ROI. So this is a notable difference among consumer industry respondents. Another notable difference here is the focus on corporate reputation, purpose. 57% of them are focused on measuring corporate reputation in relation to their digital investments as their #1 purpose indicator. And so this is also, again, different from what we see from some of the other industries. There's a lot of data on the slide, so maybe I'll stop here to open the discussion, see, Dalibor, if you have anything, or Tim, anything you want to add before we move on to the next one. Or if we have any questions from the audience as well.
Yeah, that's fair. So you mentioned that the consumer industry is slightly behind global average in their investments in cloud, in their investments in data analytics. Do you have a sense that this is because they are slower to get on the bus? Or is it perhaps because some of these investments have been made already in the past?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think that goes as well to looking at some of the sector level data. When we look at consumer, there's automotive, consumer products, retail, wholesale and distribution, transportation, hospitality, services. And so, my hypothesis is, and with some familiarity with the data as well, that as we start to look at sectors like retail, they would have moved to cloud already as part of the e-commerce movement. And but quite different for a sector like automotive, where IoT and edge computing, being able to interoperate with cloud with autonomous vehicles, is something that's very much a now issue. So I think it really does. We're giving you the industry view. The sector view here is very important for whether, with your judgment, this data looks right. For edge computing, I would expect for the automotive industry that this is an incredibly important issue right now with autonomous vehicles, with safety of autonomous vehicles, and making sure that sensor data in those vehicles are being able to be processed with very low latency, high frequency at the edge. And then for less time sensitive computing needs, that all of that sensor data from vehicles as well as the surrounding infrastructure can go into the cloud for greater intelligence and predictive scenario modeling to create safer environments. So I think it's going to be a little bit different for every sector. I think for retail, probably it's an early adopter type of issue. For e-commerce, where they've made that move already, but that there's lots of opportunity still for retail with wearables and beacons in their stores for advertising and a number of other applications. So I think, in short, even if you've already moved to the cloud, if you're looking to take advantage of generative AI, edge computing, and any of these other technologies, continued investments in these areas is going to be very important. Tim, anything to add? Or
nope, you nailed it.
Okay, I guess I'll keep us moving along then. Next up, we have ERNI. So again, a very different industry. When we're looking at ERI here, we're talking about electric utilities, gas utilities, aerospace and defense, manufacturing as well. So even within the industry, very different sectors at different levels of maturity with different needs. But I think largely what we're seeing here in terms of the investment trends is that the industry tends to be outpacing other industries in the focus on developing really strong platform computing infrastructures. We see lots of green here around IoT, edge, and quantum computing capabilities. So a little bit more maybe of an innovation budget here focused on areas like quantum. Even though this 19% is lower than other industries, it's still leading in terms of where the market is in terms of quantum spend right now. Notably, these industry respondents are 12 percentage points above the global average in the focus on sustainability. So this tends to be a very strong KPI priority for these organizations. So this is why we're calling them secure and connected organizations. They're looking at more connected computing infrastructures. They're looking at investing more in security of those infrastructures in some cases. They're leading financial KPI, different from the global budget KPI, different from consumer that was focused on ROI. In this case, we have them focused on operating margin. And if we look at manufacturing, still recovering from supply chain disruption and some of these other types of business models that fall under ERNI, I think it starts to make sense of why operating margin and employee productivity, supply to demand ratio, which was a very low KPI for other industries, but we see it here on the right used to a much higher extent, that there are very different priorities that we're seeing in terms of spend and ROI here. So again, lots of data. I don't want to drain all of the data on the slide, but any questions or conversations before I move us on? Okay.
So clearly significant investments are heading, and I'm sorry, actually, live webcast, right? My computer froze, I had to restart. Very interesting to observe that in ENR, we see the obviously heavy investment going into Internet of Things, IT/OT, broadband. So it's heavy investments in the infrastructure.
Correct.
Infrastructure side, setting them up for the future, right? That's what I'm taking as.
Yeah, and then the relationship between the infrastructure investment and how they're measuring value is clear, with the focus on operating margin, supply and demand, and sustainability. So we see here this focus on a more secure and sustainable long-term operating infrastructure, and measures of success are to what extent that they're able to achieve that. So quite different again when we look at the financial services industry. And I think this is one of the things that I really like about having a consistent set of value measures. We can really start to see what some of the differences are when we go from industry to industry. So financial services respondents included banking and capital markets, insurance, real estate, and investment management companies. And what we see from financial services is that they are investing heavily and to a greater extent in a large number of technologies. So from a technology investment standpoint, mobile, broadband and wireless, cloud, identity and access management, edge computing, it's a lot more technologies to have to fit into the budget to interoperate with one another, creating more complex technology architectures to have to manage for an already very highly regulated industry. So lots of technologies, high level of investments across these technologies versus other industries. And in terms of measurement, we see that financial services industry respondents tend to be measuring more KPIs. So if we think about the KPI wheel, a lot more green around the whole wheel versus other industries. So there's a higher measurement maturity in thinking kind of more holistically about where value should be coming from. For financial, similar to the global average, we see that budget versus actual cost is the leading financial value indicator that they're looking for here. The next two are also very similar to the global trend, customer engagement and productivity. I would call out productivity here, though, because we do see that process productivity is 7 percentage points more important to financial institutions than it is to respondents overall. So 81% is the global average. It's 88% for financial services organizations. So that emphasis on productivity is even higher than it is for processes, also even higher than we see for global organizations on employee productivity, 81%. And then the leading purpose indicator that they care about, which is also pretty much above the global average, but it's 8 percentage points above, is corporate reputation. So we're over 70% of financial services industry respondents are using corporate reputation as their top purpose-related KPI.
Diana, there's a question in the Q&A about the global
Thanks
averages.
for flagging it.
Yeah.
Yep, the global averages come from this study. So when I'm referring to the global average, that's the full 1,600 global respondents. And by global, we're talking about the 14 countries that were part of our survey across these 6 industries. The survey is director level, actually manager level, all the way up to board, CEO, and C-suite. So we have a good swath of decision makers, and the criteria is they need to be knowledgeable on how their organization is investing in technology and how their organization is measuring value. Thanks for the question.
And Diana, this may be a good moment just to let the audience know that in 2 weeks, we are going to reconvene for the episode 3, when we are going to take a look at regional data. So we'll be able to see what's happening in the United States versus Germany versus Canada and other countries. So that would be another very, I think, insightful peek. So for those who might follow all 3 episodes, you would be able to extract from here both what your industry is doing and how it compares to other peers of your industry, but also there'll be a regional angle to it too, which I think provides the full sort of 360-degree view that you can use to compare yourselves to others, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for the call out. We hope we'll see you there. So for anyone interested in government and public services, on both the investment side and the measurement side, we see different trends here as well. On the investment side, we do see a much higher focus on investment in our cybersecurity capabilities, in particular, zero trust. Government tends to be one of the leading industries focused on investing in zero trust security capabilities. We also see one of the differences with government is around its horizon planning. So our global survey showed that on average, most organizations are thinking about measuring their digital value on a quarterly or annual horizon. Government respondents tend to be a bit different here. They are more apt than other organizations to be looking at value on a 3-year plus time horizon. So one of the reasons we've discussed that might be is because governments have different procurement cycles for technology, and those longer procurement cycles and those longer contracts make it so that these investments are maybe a 2-year program that they're investing in. And so they are tracking budget cycles differently, investments differently, and then it would make sense that they're tracking the returns differently as well. So the security focus is quite different. User and entity behavior analytics is what UEBA is here. And so that is a cybersecurity analytic capability where we see government organizations and public services industries investing at a higher level than others. And then on the value side, we can see a couple differences here. If you've started to see customer and purpose, the second and the last one here, customer satisfaction. Whereas for the other industries, we were seeing customer engagement as the leading indicator. Over here, we see customer satisfaction, 71%. So a different focus for government and public services. And then organizational mission fit instead of corporate reputation is the leading purpose indicator for government. We also see overall government respondents are much higher for almost all of the purpose KPIs than average. So organizational trust, they use that KPI at 6 percentage points more than others. Workforce diversity, they're using it at 8 percentage points more than others. And workforce inclusion, they're using it at 8 percentage points more than other. So government respondents here are one of the leading industries for measuring purpose-related KPIs.
And I can also see emphasis on employee development, 10 points higher than global average, right?
Yeah, that's a big one. Employee development, employee productivity, as well as those workforce-related purpose KPIs are here. So there is, I think, a much bigger focus on how investing internal within the organization and building that internal culture is an important driver of some of these other outcomes as well.
And to me, that makes sense. Obviously, the public sector organizations, governments, public services have a different sort of purpose than profits, which is evident in all others, right? So this is a good confirmation, and I think a very good guideline for people who are in this industry to see what their peers are actually focused on more.
Absolutely. And on the right here, I'll say this is just the top 5 leading indicators and 5 points of difference. We have the full 46 KPIs for government in the full report. So at the end, we'll be showing and sharing how to access the full report. So there's a lot more data where this came from for government as well, and the other industries. So moving on to life sciences and healthcare. On the investment side, we see that life sciences and healthcare organizations are investing more in augmented, virtual, and immersive reality than other industries are, as well as speech and gesture interfaces. So there is an experiential element here for life sciences and healthcare. And so we can think of this as on both the patient side, for patient experiences. I think, we've seen a lot with tele appointments and more virtual health in the last couple of years. We can also think about this on kind of the virtual and robotic surgery side. So a lot more with being able to use augmented and virtual reality for those types of high precision types of treatments and surgeries. We also see a lot of green here around data and analytics, AI and machine learning, cloud platforms, cloud native, and IoT. And so on the one hand, these are kind of the complementary technologies that would allow the infrastructure for those types of experiences to be possible, as well as the data models, as well as the analytics for those types of solutions. On the measurement side, customer engagement, budget versus actual cost and productivity, employee productivity and corporate reputation. So some of the things that we've already talked about for other industries we see within life sciences. So I think what's maybe more interesting here is some of the areas where life sciences respondents are showing bigger gaps from the global average, because they tend to be trending with the global average for the leading indicators. But on the far right, we see areas where they're really differentiated. And so that's in areas like customer satisfaction. They lead the global average by 6 percentage points. Business continuity, they're leading by 10 percentage points. Prioritizing employee retention, they're leading by 8 percentage points. And measuring organizational resilience is another area where we see them leading. And then I would also just call out purpose. So next to government, life sciences and healthcare is the other industry that is very focused on purpose and is above average for all purpose KPIs that we asked about in the study.
This is a this is a wealth of information, wealth of insight, and I know that this is just scratching the surface of all the data that's available, right? And so Diana, could you just share with us and the audiences the access to this data? How might people be able to access the information through the report? Is there a repository of this data that could be accessed and people just sort of view and model?
Yeah, great question. So at the end, we'll share the link. Hopefully, we can send it around to viewers as well. I think this deck will be available, but there's a more extended version of this report that is on the Deloitte website. So I would definitely encourage everyone to download that full report. We have, in addition to the slides that Tim went through earlier, we have every single question we asked about in the study in that format. So you can see for all 46 KPIs and for all technologies, detailed information at the industry level. And then if you want to go even deeper than that, you can, reach out to Deloitte and we have the data and we can take you through all different kinds of cuts of it.
Wow, very impressive.
Thanks. So there's a lot here. I'll maybe bring us on to technology, media, and telecommunications next. And with this industry, I think, you'll see things like cloud platforms and edge computing and IoT at a lower level here. I'll call those out first just because we can probably expect that this was an industry that was an early adopter of some of these technologies that are in gray. And therefore, they're shifting their priority to maybe more mature areas like AI and machine learning, deep learning, speech and gesture, cloud native, 5G, and so on. You would see that the lower maturity areas, and many of these areas like mobile or 4G, are focused on to a lesser extent because now they're on to cloud native and 5G and deep learning and some of these more mature areas. On the right side, I'll point out a couple of differences and notable insights for technology, media, and telecommunications companies. We see operating margin is their leading financial indicator. So something quite different for them. And also a difference here that we're seeing is organizational resilience tends to be the leading purpose indicator for this industry. So great news in terms of organizational resilience that tech, media, and telecom companies that are providing important technology infrastructure want to make sure that it's resilient, and that's great. On the purpose side, we do see, though, that this industry, besides this indicator, tends to be below average on many of the other purpose-related metrics. One of the notable ones is sustainability, where we saw that ERNI was the leading industry in the focus on sustainability. And so when we talk a lot about technology, ESG, I think, this is an important issue that is central to this industry. We can also see EBITDA is used more than in other industries here, customer retention, and that they're likely to be using process and workforce related indicators to a lesser extent than other industries, in particular things like employee utilization rate.
Very interesting, very, very interesting. And I think that a lot of this is now to a certain degree validating intuition, but I think it is clearly very, very important for people to actually be able to pinpoint and say, hey, here are the actual stats. This is what our industry is doing. So this is actually very, very, very usable and useful information.
Thank you.
Very,
and
very
that's
cool. Thank you.
Intended to be used. And thanks to Tim for putting into the chat the link to the full report. So hopefully, if you like what you're seeing here, you can see even more of it.
Yep. What I will do is, I was going to say, I will make sure that in the follow-up to this webcast, I'm going to include that link so everybody will be able to access it straight at the source. So that would be probably the simplest thing to do here. Yeah.
Perfect. And Tim, now I think over to you.
Sure. Let me bring it home with sort of a bookend as to the earlier conversation. If you remember at the beginning, why do we structure it this way? Well, just, hey, we're tackling this amorphous beast, which is digital transformation. Here's a way to demystify and feel better that, you know exactly what to be swinging at and why, or you know when to run away if the digital transformation comes across your desk and you know it's not going to succeed. But if you remember back to the spectrum, and we talked about the various levels of it, now that Diana has taken you through the deep cut of all the information and where to look and things like that, there's going to be a set of folks on this call and then broader who believe, you know what, got it. If I know where I want to play and I can address the barriers, I'm going to go bold. So it was also helpful for us to contextualize what bold means in our view regarding digital, at least as it pertains to monetization. What I mean by that is, we don't have to go back to it, but there's a level 3 and a level 4 in which you're effectively using digital to open up new offerings, new capabilities, new businesses. So we asked in the survey and said, hey, as a proxy for that, if you are going to be using digital for revenue or for growth, kind of how are you doing it, right? Like what exactly are these bold moves that you're doing that feel just net new? And so for those of you who are like, look, I want to see what the Joneses are doing. I want to keep up with them. Here's a way to start thinking about it, which is what we just call monetization of your digital transformation. It's a bit deeper cut than what we typically advise clients to be focused on. And we don't come out of the gate and be like, yeah, who cares about your foundational stuff? Why don't you go monetize? But again, for those of us who want to go to the 201 level on digital transformation, here's how to think about it, right? What are we seeing in sectors in terms of what they're turning on? TMT is, of course, blowing it out as it pertains to everything around personalization, which makes sense in terms of the nature of their, sort of clientele and the data that they are hoovering up, right? But then in application, advertisements, subscriptions, one of the things that we always hear a lot about is data monetization. Let me go actually commercialize the data that I have, and that is a thing if you look at the re-leveraging internal data overall. But anyways, this is a way to think as well when you're thinking about what else you can do vis-a-vis the problems of digital. Just using the rows is some inspiration therein. If we go to the next slide, another slice, as we always show, are some of the constraints you might run into trying to do this, and also just understand where the sectors are really hitting the wall. So not to be too shocking, but if you look down, one of the ones that are the biggest spike is around disrupting and or competing with our traditional businesses. So for those of us who said, hey, we're radical and we're going to reinvent and all that stuff, that's great. But do not think you're going to get away from organizational drag and convincing that you need to do to be that much different. Again, why Diana and I are looking at, that one question that we got where everybody's saying they're bold, being like, really? Like you're going to be able to address all of these things that were showing up there easy? And the answer is probably not, right? So again, if you think you're going bold, this is some inspiration as to where boldness lies, but also some of the problems that are out there that, again, you can pressure test. So let's bring it home with the capstone slide, the so what's as to all of this. I mean, there's a whole bunch of lessons in there, a whole bunch that you're going to find that Diana and I and others have not uncovered yet. We'd love to hear that, whether live or later on. But really, what is the sort of summary as to what we talked about today? Really, it's about competitive advantage. It's about recognizing that digital transformation is a continuous phenomenon. It's not acute. So getting it right means you're ultimately getting yourself right in terms of long-term sustainment of your enterprise. So that means starting out first, understanding exactly what digital transformation means to you, to the various BUs, to whoever's taking it on, and calibrate your spend accordingly. That calibration totally depends on being intentional as to the technologies you pick, the change management that you stand up, what's going to happen to your ultimate talent, just having that lineage and feeling good. You'll see those dollars return based off a comprehensive and thoughtful strategy, but also making sure you're not leaving money on the table. That's by understanding the KPIs that might be directly available to you, but also the indirect ones that could lead to even more value. Again, if you're doing something and you believe is a level 1, maybe that's turning on level 4 and you just didn't know it. Doing so by using aspects such as this research to make sure it's putting you in a different position than your peers, but also being realistic and also thoughtful of the horizons as to how you measure this stuff. Massive digital transformations in which you cut every year make 0 sense. Massive digital transformations in which you expect value to show up in the first month makes 0 sense. So tailoring exactly for you, exactly where these go, and learning how to measure and using those measures potentially as off-ramps for digital transformations that are going awry and baking that into the original plan are super important. And then last but not least, yes, for those of us who want to go quite advanced in our digital transformations, use what we showed earlier to help you get the right strategy for what's out there. So if we go to the last slide, we can open for questions. As we talked about, this is part 2 of 3 of these. So we do hope where everybody is back together with us to talk about regional priorities. Dalibor will send out all the links to it.
Exactly.
We can take it in whatever direction we want with the remaining minutes. But Diana and I both thank you.
So thank you very much, Tim and Diana, for this really insightful, clearly massive effort, massive research that I think is going to be now relevant to sort of all of our industries and across most of the regions where we operate. There's just one additional question came through. How do we differentiate, if we differentiate, between digital and business transformation? So Tim, do you want to maybe take that one? How do we differentiate, if we differentiate, between digital transformation? Sorry?
Yeah, it's just typing it as you said it. I mean, like our view, and I'm sure there's exceptions, it's very rare these days to be doing a business transformation in which the nature of the tech estate isn't important for it. Sure, how you think about pricing and things like that, but the vast majority of your digital business transformations are going to involve enough of an investment in tech that it's going to trip the line. We had research a long time ago, well, feels long, but it actually wasn't long ago, that effectively our view is that there's really no difference these days between corporate and digital strategy. And actually part of our research that Diana led was actually looking at 10Ks to see how much they talk about digital strategy versus corporate strategy. We find the more often those things are joined together in discussions and intent, the higher the value, at least we saw in the market. So we see very, very limited difference. In fact, maybe digital as a phrase is going to go away pretty soon, but it's this DNA as to how you attack these transformations that it's going to stand the test of time.
Yeah, wonderful. That's exactly my assumption. Answer was exactly that. I think that it is. We no longer have analog transformations of any kind, do we?
That's right.
So Diana and Tim, we are coming at time. I want to thank you very much for your time and for your wisdom and for information that you've shared. And for our audience members, in addition to, of course, these links being sent very soon by me and recording will be available to you as well. Feel free to share it with your colleagues and your peers. And I will invite you to return 2 weeks from now when we unpack the third episode in this series and take a look at this information from the regional perspectives. So with that, I would like to thank you all very much for your time. And I would like to wish you all a very happy Tuesday. And I look forward to seeing you again very soon. All the best. Bye-bye.